Hey yo, listen. Papoose is really out here, in the year of our Lord 2026, asking a woman who did federal time for him, who came home and rebuilt her entire empire from the concrete up, who put her name on a battle league, on a talk show, on a reality show, on a book, on a tour, on a whole second act of a career that most rappers never even get a first act of. This man is asking that woman for half. Half of the 4 million. Half of the sweat. Half of the sacrifice. Half of the 6.5 years she sat in a cell while he was on the outside, allegedly writing love songs instead of writing hits, allegedly gorilla glued to her visitation schedule instead of glued to a studio microphone. And Remy Ma, God bless her patience, went up to Angie Martinez's barbecue and did not bring a side dish. She brought Pap. She threw him on that grill, seasoned him with every receipt she had been saving for a decade, and served him medium well in front of a crowd that was there to eat ribs, not to watch a man get financially cremated on a Sunday afternoon. And what everybody thinks they saw on that live is not what actually happened. What everybody thinks this is a messy divorce, a couple of ex-spouses arguing about paper, is not what this is. This is a career autopsy. This is the moment where the culture finally gets to look at a man who has been protected for 15 years by his wife's resume and ask the question out loud that nobody was allowed to ask when they were still together, which is what exactly did the fedora do? What did the fedora contribute? Where is the fedora's #1 record? Where is the fedora's platinum plaque? Where is the fedora's tour bus? Where is the fedora's publishing check that is not attached to hers? And when we get to the part of this video where I walk you through the actual business structure of a hip-hop marriage where one spouse is a certified brand and the other spouse is a certified +1, and I promise you we are getting there, we are going deep into it. You are going to understand why this $2 million ask is not a divorce demand. It is a confession. It is the first honest thing Papoose has said in 15 years about who is actually carrying the household. Because the man is not asking for half of a marriage. He is asking for half of a woman's life's work, and the culture is finally awake enough to notice the difference. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me set this whole thing up properly for anybody who is just walking into the room, because this is not a story that started last week, and it is not a story you can understand by watching one clip of Remy on a live. To understand why Papoose asking for $2 million is the funniest and most disrespectful thing that has happened in hip-hop this entire year, you have to understand the timeline. You have to understand who these two people are to each other, who they are to the culture, and what the actual math of their marriage looks like when you put it on paper. Remy Ma, real name Remy Ma, is one of the most decorated female battle rappers and street rappers to ever come out of New York. Terror Squad affiliate, Fat Joe's protege, the woman behind Lean Back's most memorable verse, a Grammy nominee, a BET Award winner, and the co-host of one of the most watched daytime shows in black entertainment for years. She went to prison in 2008 on a shooting-related conviction, served 6 years, came home in 2014, and instead of quietly disappearing the way the industry expects a woman with a record to do, she came back and became bigger than she was before she left. That is not a normal comeback. That is a generational comeback. That is a Robert Downey Jr. level comeback in a genre that historically does not let women have those. Papoose, real name Shamil Mackey, is a battle-tested Brooklyn lyricist who has been rapping since the late 90s, who had one of the most infamous major label near misses in rap history when his Jive Records deal fell apart in the mid-2000s, and who has spent the better part of 2 decades being described by fans as underrated, which, if we are being honest with ourselves in 2026, is what the culture calls a rapper who never actually broke through. And these two got married on Rikers Island in 2008 while Remy was still incarcerated, which is a beautiful love story on paper and, as it turns out, allegedly a very expensive love story off paper. Because what has now come out, in Remy's own words on Angie Martinez's live, is that this man is filing for divorce and asking for approximately half of her reported $4 million net worth. $2 million. From a woman who did federal time. From a woman who out-earned him for the entire duration of the marriage. From a woman who, according to her own testimony, was allegedly cheated on, disrespected, and dragged through a therapist's office by a man who then had the audacity to be the one asking for the check. The stakes here are not just personal. The stakes are cultural, because this is the first big public divorce in hip-hop of the streaming era where the woman is unambiguously the earner and the man is unambiguously the +1. And the culture is watching in real time to see whether the industry treats her the way it treats every male rapper who has ever had to write a check to an ex. The stakes are financial, because $2 million is not a symbolic number in a genre where most artists do not clear that in a lifetime. And the stakes are reputational, because whatever happens in this courtroom is going to define how the next generation of women in hip-hop write their prenups, structure their LLCs, and title their publishing. So the question that is going to drive this entire video is a simple one, and I want you to hold it in your head from now until the very last sentence. What exactly is Papoose asking to be paid for? Let us start with what everybody can see with their own eyes, because before we get into the industry breakdown and the deep structural stuff, we need to lay the surface receipts on the table so nobody in the comments can tell me I am making this up. Piece of evidence number 1 is the live itself, the Angie Martinez barbecue live from a couple of weekends ago, where Remy Ma, on camera, in front of thousands of viewers streaming in real time, said the words out loud. She said this man wants half. She said it with her chest. She said it while Angie was standing right there. She said it while other people at the barbecue were reacting in the background. This is not a subtweet. This is not a rumor from a blog. This is the woman herself on her own live, telling the world what her husband is trying to walk out the door with. And the moment she said it, the internet did what the internet does, which is clip it, meme it, and turn it into a referendum on Papoose's entire existence within 24 hours. Piece of evidence number 2 is Papoose's own social media activity, which, and this is the part that is genuinely comedic, has not slowed down at all. This is a man who is allegedly in the middle of a divorce, allegedly asking for $2 million, allegedly the subject of a viral roasting from his own wife, and his response has been to keep posting the fedora content. The fedora is on. The fedora is always on. The Anthony Hopkins Solve a Murder Mystery fedora is riding through Instagram stories like the man is about to interrogate a suspect in a black and white movie. And the culture has noticed. The culture has zoomed in. The culture has decided that the fedora is now a personality trait, which is not a compliment. Piece of evidence number 3 is the jet hangar situation, which I still cannot believe is real, but here we are. Reports and social clips have circulated of Papoose being associated with airport and jet hangar content. The man is out here doing challenges and posing near private aviation in a way that raises the exact question Remy raised on the live, which is if you do not have the money, what are you doing at the hangar? And if you do have the money, why are you asking for hers? Pick a lane, sir. You cannot be simultaneously broke enough to demand half of your wife's net worth and flush enough to be out here cosplaying as a man with a Gulfstream. The math does not math. Piece of evidence number 4 is what I am going to call the Stevie Wonder shield era, which is Papoose's ongoing commitment to walking around with sunglasses so large and so opaque that Remy herself joked he looks like he is not even trying to be seen by fans, because fans are not pulling up on him. Nobody is asking for a picture. Nobody is running up saying hello. The shields are for a level of fame that, according to the woman who has been married to him for 18 years, he does not actually have. And that is not me saying it. That is her, in her own words, in front of Angie, in front of the barbecue, in front of the world. And piece of evidence number 5, because I said at least 4, but you are going to get more, is the tonal contrast between how Remy carries herself in these clips and how Papoose carries himself. Remy is unbothered. Remy is laughing. Remy is eating her food and running her business and hosting her show and building her battle league. Papoose is posting. Papoose is filing. Papoose is allegedly, according to his wife, asking for jerk chicken money at a divorce hearing while dressed like he is about to keynote a Kangol convention. That contrast, that visual, tonal, spiritual contrast between one person moving like a boss and the other person moving like a man who missed his window, is the entire video in one image. And it is only going to get worse from here. And oh, do I have more for you. The stands, the fedora defenders, the he was loyal when she was locked up brigade, you are not going to like this next section. Because up to this point, I have only shown you what everybody with a phone can already see. I have shown you the live, the fits, the fedora, the shields, the vibe. That is layer 1. That is the appetizer. What I am about to walk you through next is the cultural evidence, the industry insider stuff, the stuff that the barbecue crowd was reacting to in real time, and the stuff that Remy was setting up before she ever dropped the $2 million bomb. Female artists, female DJs, female executives, female fans, the entire ecosystem of women who have watched Remy carry Papoose's name in interviews for a decade have taken this personally. And I mean personally. The commentary I have seen from women in this space is not the standard, pick a side energy of a normal celebrity divorce. It is a specific, focused, almost protective anger because Remy is not just a rapper to these women. She is the case study. She is the woman who did the time, came home, out-earned her husband, publicly praised him anyway, and is now being asked to hand over half of what she built while he was on the outside doing what Remy herself described as being gorilla glued to her. That phrase alone, gorilla glued to my nuts, has become a meme, a rallying cry, and a piece of cultural shorthand for what women in this industry have been saying about a certain kind of husband for years. Piece of cultural evidence number 2 is Fat Joe. And I want to be careful here because Joe has not made a formal statement as of the time I am recording this, but anybody who has followed the Terror Squad family for the last 20 years knows how Joe feels about Remy. Joe has publicly and repeatedly called Remy one of the greatest to ever do it. Joe is there when she went in. Joe is there when she came home. Joe has put her on every major platform he has touched. And you do not need Joe to release a press release to understand where the Terror Squad stands on a man asking Remy for half. The silence from certain corners and the very specific loudness from others tells you everything. Piece of cultural evidence number 3 is the battle rap community, which is genuinely important context here because Papoose's identity for the last 10 years has been tied up in battle rap culture, in URL, in the Chrome 23s, in the whole ecosystem, and specifically in his role adjacent to Remy's Chrome 23 Battle League. Remy on the live referenced the incident where Papoose knocked out a battle rapper, an incident that has been widely reported, that led to legal consequences, and that Papoose himself has spoken about publicly on multiple occasions. Remy's framing of that incident on the live was devastating because she connected it to the business. She pointed out that this man allegedly compromised her business venture, her battle league, her attempt to build a new revenue stream in a space adjacent to his, by getting into a physical altercation with one of the featured performers. And the battle rap community, which is a small and tight ecosystem, has receipts on this that go back years. Piece of cultural evidence number 4 is the therapy story, which is the piece of this that I think is going to age the worst for Papoose over time. On his own podcast appearance, in his own voice, unforced, Papoose walked the public through the sequence of events where he says he discovered Remy was allegedly involved with another man, confronted her, went to therapy, and had the therapist articulate the terms of the reconciliation on his behalf. Now, I am not a therapist. I am not a marriage counselor. But I know the culture, and the culture heard a grown man say out loud that he needed a professional to speak for him in his own marriage, and the culture is not going to unhear that. That clip is going to follow this man around for the rest of his career. And piece of cultural evidence number 5, because I promised at least 4 and I always overdeliver, is the visible, quantifiable difference in how these two are moving in public right now. Remy is booked. Remy is on stages. Remy is on panels. Remy is at Angie's barbecue eating ribs and running the room. Papoose is posting. Papoose is filing. Papoose is, according to his own wife, allegedly out here doing viral challenges at airports and walking around in disguised glasses like a man being chased by paparazzi that do not exist. And I want to be fair here, because I do not want anybody to think I am not steelmanning the other side. There is a version of this story where Papoose is a devoted husband who stood by his wife during her incarceration, who raised their children, who kept the household together while she rebuilt her career, and who is now entitled under the law to an equitable share of assets accumulated during the marriage. That is a real argument. That is a legally coherent argument. I will give it its due. But then you look at the specifics. You look at Remy's own testimony that he was not the primary earner. You look at the timeline of who was doing what during which years. You look at the fact that her career was already established before they married on Rikers in 2008, and the equitable share argument starts to look a lot less like a 50-50 split and a lot more like a request for a subsidy. Which brings us to the real story, the one nobody in the mainstream hip-hop press is going to break down for you the way I am about to break it down right now. Because here is where we shift gears completely, and I need you to lock in for this section because this is the part of the video where we stop talking about the drama and we start talking about the business, and once you see the business, you cannot unsee it. What we are actually watching here is a case study in what happens when the modern hip-hop economy collides with a marriage that was never structured for the modern hip-hop economy. And there are 3 separate systemic layers going on here at the same time, all of which are pointing in the same direction, all of which explain why this divorce is going to be a landmark moment in the culture whether the mainstream press understands it or not. The first systemic layer is the New York state law layer, and I want to be very careful and very general here because I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, but New York is what is known as an equitable distribution state, which means that in a divorce, marital property is not automatically split 50-50 the way it is in a community property state like California. Equitable does not mean equal. Equitable means fair, and fair takes into account who earned what, who brought what into the marriage, who contributed what to the household in non-financial ways, and a whole basket of other factors that the court weighs. Which means that Papoose walking in and demanding half is not a legal position. It is an opening negotiation. It is a bluff. It is a man asking for the ceiling because he knows the floor is going to be a lot lower, and he is hoping that the mere ask puts pressure on Remy to settle out of court to avoid the public spectacle. Except Remy has already decided that the public spectacle is the point. She went to Angie's barbecue and put the ask on record. She has taken away his leverage. She has weaponized the transparency. And that is a level of tactical intelligence that Papoose, allegedly, did not see coming. The second systemic layer is the streaming economy layer, and this is the one that I think most people do not fully understand. In the pre-streaming era, a rapper's income was concentrated in album sales, tour revenue, and features, and it was relatively easy to point at who earned what because the checks came from identifiable sources on identifiable dates. In the streaming era, a rapper's income is a diversified portfolio. It is master recording royalties from Spotify and Apple. It is publishing income from every song you wrote or co-wrote. It is sync licensing from film and television. It is brand partnerships and endorsement deals. It is YouTube ad revenue on your channel. It is podcast appearance fees. It is Cameo. It is Instagram sponsored posts. It is your own venture equity in things like a battle league or a talk show or a reality show. And when you look at Remy Ma's revenue stack in 2026, it is a diversified modern portfolio with income coming in from 6 or 7 different pipes. When you look at Papoose's revenue stack in 2026, it is, and I say this with respect for his craft as a lyricist, significantly less diversified. Which means that when you ask a court to equitably split assets acquired during a marriage, you are not splitting one pot. You are splitting 7 pots, and 6 of them have Remy's name on them, and one of them has a name that nobody has said out loud yet. Which brings us to the third systemic layer, and this is the one I have been saving. The third systemic layer is the ownership structure of the joint ventures. Remy and Papoose have collaborated on a number of projects over the years. There is the reality television footprint. There is the joint album Golden Child from a few years back. There is the merchandising. There is the branded content. And the question that a divorce court is going to have to answer is who actually owned what. Whose LLC held the reality show equity? Whose publishing company controlled the joint album masters? Whose name was on the merchandise trademark? And this is where a marriage that was built on trust and love and mutual support in 2008 collides with a business reality that in 2026 requires paperwork, contracts, and formal corporate structure. Because if the paperwork favors Remy, and based on how Remy has publicly conducted her business over the last decade, I would allegedly bet very heavily that it does, then Papoose is not asking for half of a marriage. He is asking for a court to override the paperwork he already signed. And that is not a divorce demand. That is a Hail Mary. That is a man who has looked at the LLCs, looked at the trademarks, looked at the publishing splits, seen that his name is not on the important lines, and decided that his only remaining play is to appeal to the public narrative of, I was the loyal husband. Which is exactly why Remy went to Angie's barbecue first. She got out in front of the narrative. She poisoned that well before Papoose could drink from it. And now every clip of him talking about wedding vows and roofs and prom nights hits the culture as evidence of a man reaching for a story that the receipts are not going to support in court. And this is where I have to say the thing out loud, the thing that I've been building to for this entire video, the thing that the fedora and the shields and the jet hanger and the therapy tape and the Gorilla Glued quote, and the $4 million valuation and the equitable distribution laws and the LLC structures have all been pointing at, and I am going to say it plainly because you have earned it by sticking with me this far. What we are actually watching is not a divorce. What we are watching is a career-ending admission. Because when a man who has been marketed for 2 decades as an underrated lyrical genius, as a battle-tested Brooklyn veteran, as one of the great should-have-beens of his era, when that man walks into a divorce court and asks for half of his wife's net worth, he is not making a legal argument. He is making a public confession. He is telling the culture, in the loudest possible way, that he does not have his own money. He is telling the industry that the 15 years of underrated branding was allegedly, in significant part, a marketing wrapper around a man whose household was being carried by his wife's income. He is telling every young rapper watching this that the keep my head down and grind version of the career he has been selling on podcasts and in interviews did not, at the end of the day, produce a portfolio large enough to walk away from a marriage without asking for a subsidy. And that is not a small admission. That is a career-defining admission. That is the kind of admission that changes how every future interview, every future verse, every future feature is heard. Because from this point forward, when Papoose gets on a track and talks about hustle, talks about grind, talks about being that guy, the culture is going to hear the $2 million ask underneath every bar. The culture is going to remember that this is the man who, when the marriage ended, could not fund his own exit. And I want to be crystal clear here, because I am not saying Papoose has no talent. I am not saying Papoose has not worked. I am not saying Papoose does not deserve, under the law, an equitable share of what was actually built jointly during the marriage. I am saying that the ask itself, the specific number, the specific timing, the specific decision to go for half of a woman's life's work, is the loudest possible signal that the man's own portfolio, on its own, does not sustain the lifestyle he has been performing in public. That is the reveal. That is the truth bomb. That is the thing that the fedora and the shields have been distracting the culture from for the last 5 years. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and every clip of him from here forward is going to look different. Every fedora post is going to look like camouflage. Every jet hanger photo is going to look like a set piece. Every loyal husband narrative is going to look like a pre-litigation marketing campaign. And Remy, who did the time, who came home, who rebuilt, who out-earned, who out-hustled, who out-strategized her own husband to the point that she got in front of the story before he could even file, Remy is standing on the other side of this. Holding $4 million, a diversified business, a reputation that is intact, and a barbecue plate. That is the picture. That is the whole story. And this is why, when the dust settles on this whole thing, Remy Ma is going to walk out of this divorce with more than she walked in with, and I do not just mean financially. I mean culturally. I mean reputationally. I mean in terms of her positioning in the culture for the next 10 years. Because what Remy has done, whether she planned it this way or whether it happened by instinct, is she has turned a personal crisis into a public masterclass in how a woman in hip-hop is supposed to protect herself. She did the time and came home stronger. She built a portfolio that is not dependent on any one man. She kept her name on her paperwork. She built a battle league. She built a talk show. She built a reality show footprint. She kept her publishing. She kept her masters where she could. And when the marriage finally reached the point of no return, she did not run and hide. She did not release a carefully worded statement through a publicist. She did not go on a sympathetic podcast to plead her case. She walked up to Angie Martinez's barbecue and told the truth in front of the entire culture, and she did it while eating. That is a level of unbothered that you cannot fake. That is a level of confidence that only comes from knowing that your paperwork is right, that your business is right, that your relationships with your peers are right, and that the story you are telling is the story the receipts are going to back up. And that is why the contrast in this video is so important, because on one side of this you have a man in a fedora asking a therapist to speak for him and asking a judge for half of a woman's life's work, and on the other side you have a woman running her business, running her mouth, running her show, and running rings around him in the public narrative without breaking a sweat. One person is scrambling. The other person is eating. One person is performing. The other person is producing. One person is filing motions. The other person is filing paperwork on her fourth business venture. That is the story of this divorce in one image. And the moral of it, the actual takeaway for anybody watching this video who is going to have their own marriage, their own business, their own set of hard conversations one day, is that the person who does the work when nobody is watching is the person who wins when everybody is watching. Remy Ma did the work when she was in a cell. Remy Ma did the work when nobody in the industry thought she was coming back. Remy Ma did the work when her husband was allegedly gorilla glued to her visitation calendar instead of glued to a producer's studio. And now, in 2026, when the receipts are being read out loud in front of the culture, Remy Ma is the one holding the pen. That is not luck. That is not karma. That is discipline compounding over 18 years, and it is beautiful to watch even when the story that surfaces it is ugly. And this is only the start of the Papoose files, because I promise you, we are not done with this story by a long shot. There are at least 2 more shoes waiting to drop that I want you to keep your eyes on over the next few weeks. The first shoe is the formal legal filing itself, because everything we have been talking about in this video is based on Remy's public account of what Papoose is asking for, and once the actual paperwork hits the docket, we are going to get real numbers. Real allegations, real counter-allegations, and real breakdowns of who owned what during the marriage. That is when this story goes from a barbecue live to a full-blown industry case study, and I am going to be here breaking every filing down piece by piece the moment it drops. The second shoe is the Papoose Responds tour, because there is no version of this where he stays quiet forever. He is already on podcasts. He is already telling his side. And the moment his side collides with the paperwork, the moment he says something that the documents contradict, the culture is going to eat him alive a second time. And I am going to be here for that too, receipts in one hand, timeline in the other. So if you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment. This is the story. This is the channel that is going to walk you through every twist of this thing without pulling any punches and without picking up any checks from either side. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and drop in the comments who you think walks out of this divorce with the better long-term position, because I have a feeling I already know the answer, and I have a feeling you already know it too. And before you click off, I want to point you at the video that is going to be your natural next stop, which is the deep dive I am dropping next on the actual paperwork behind Remy's Chrome 23 Battle League, who owns it, who funded it, what the equity split looks like, and why the incident where Papoose allegedly compromised one of her featured performers may end up being one of the most expensive punches ever thrown in hip-hop when the dollar figure of the damage he did to her business venture finally gets calculated out in court. That is the video that connects the punch to the paycheck. That is the video that shows you why every choice Papoose made from 2019 forward may end up being priced in dollars in front of a judge. Click that next. Do not miss it. This is your boy signing off. The fedora is off. The shields are off. The truth is on. And we are just getting started.